So today we have an opportunity, at least for me, to do a plug for the International Research School of Game Design. And it sounds very far away. It sounds very American, I kind of think, or international, or something like that. But it's right here in Gotland. The International Research School of Game Design is, in fact, a collaboration between Uppsala University and Gotland University. And I'll take you through some of the slides. This is me. My name is Stephen Bachelder. I'm a professor in convergent media, more specifically artistic expression in the media. My background is art. And I work here as a professor at the, what do we call ourselves? The Game Design Technology and Learning Process Institute here at the university. So this will be a brief introduction. What I'd like to do basically is just go through this. This is a work in progress. It's relatively new. And what I'll be looking for, I was actually asked to do this because we had questions from the jury. There were people coming in and said, well, we heard about this. Can't someone talk about it? Can't you inform us about that? So this is a very ad hoc, sort of dialogue-based conversation, which means I'll be expecting some questions. So, okay, brief introduction. In game design, every single element in a composition should converge to form the experience. Now, we all know in game design there's a lot of things. There are a lot of things going on, and they've been going on for a long time. If you look at a chessboard, it looks relatively simple, but the game mechanics behind it is incredibly complex. So every element must be aligned and orchestrated when brought into play. And we need to orchestrate all of this. Now, this is a huge undertaking. It's a huge job. It's a huge artifact that we're producing collectively with a large group of people. So these elements need to work with each other to form a deeper experience and a deeper meaning. If game design is going to develop, which it actually in fact is, it does bring meaning to us, then we need to think about how is that meaning being creative. So we had Bonnie yesterday talk about close reading. Well, we also do close designing, although some of that design is lost, and not all of it is read. So technology is important. Not only do we have all those elements, we have all the ways of tweaking every single one of those elements that when they come into play, they become a synergetic process in the mind of the player, that the mind of the player actually is online with what's going on in the game mechanics. And people are very important. And the components are important. And there's a lot of them. So just taking the orchestra as a metaphor, we have lots of things in just one single instrument, and this is just a tool. There's the technology in these things as well. There's also the way they came into being, what they're made up of, the circumstances around them. If you're doing a violin, you need a good maple tree. It's made out of a particular tree in a particular environment. Some trees are better than others. Some ones you want to use, some you don't. You need to store it. You need to refine it. You need to build it. You need to have craftsmanship. You need to have dedication. And you need to have cultural history. And game design has a cultural history that has been pretty stable for a few thousand years. And then suddenly we get new media, and it's this huge explosion. So not only do we need to orchestrate all of this, in game design, as opposed to other art forms, we have red versus blue. So basically, we have the result of two orchestras playing against each other in competition, where the audience listening to that finds harmony. And they find harmony in the way they want to find it. They can hear these two orchestras playing against each other and making music out of that. So that's quite an undertaking. So the International Research School of Game Design wants to look at this and say, well, how can we do this? What are the mechanisms at hand? What is going on here? And not only what is going on here, how can we take what's going on here and use this in other fields? Because there's a lot of other fields in society that could, in fact, benefit by the findings that we, and the discoveries and the developments we do in game design. So our plan is basic research as well as strategic research and practice-based research, and also generative design methods That's an important aspect of this. Now, that I feared would be difficult for all of you to see. Am I correct in that? So, I'm going to do a cardinal sin and jump out of my PowerPoint and into Illustrator, which I just got punished for. Hang on. This is going to be a rocky ride here. Okay, so we have, we're in the process of developing a series of labs here at the university and also in collaboration with Uppsala. And we have the game design lab, if we look here to your left. And there we have the AI lab, it's under construction. We have the Microsoft XNA lab, which we actually have the equipment. We have that up and running. We have the HCI and Microsoft Surface lab, also that. We have the Convergent Media lab, and we just moved into the new house there. So we're right next door to the Congress Hall. And there we have the school sound and music studio, Soundkvist Studio. We have a collaboration with them, so we're using that as a laboratory facility. And we also have Professor Nakashima and Nakashima Labs. Yeah. So I should have given you a sooner cue there. And Professor Nakashima's had a Nakashima Labs in Tokyo Tech for 35 years, and now is migrating that here to the University of Gotland to continue that work and take those findings on the basis of image processing, graphics, AI, and applying 35 years of research in the service of game design. So what can you do with all of that in game design? What can you make of that? And how can you use that also facilitating other processes? So we have also the motion capture lab, which is over in the, what is it called? Help me out here, Andreas. Thank you. I can never remember that. I always want to say the Baltic Arts Center, but it's not. It's actually our lab. It's the motion capture lab. So at Björkanders, which is straight over that way on the other side, we have a motion capture lab. One of the best motion capture systems in Northern Europe. It's very large, it's very good, it works very well. It's the equipment that was used for Matrix, not the equipment, but the same equipment. And we have a 3D lab. It's basically a render park, so it's not much to talk about. We have a mobile technologies lab, which is, I would say, an embryo at current state, but we're working towards it. And also playtesting lab, and simulation, visualization, and learning lab. Now, all of these things, some of them are full-grown, ready, they're up and running, they're up and rolling, and other ones are embryos. But they're all moving forward. And in 3 years' time, they will be up and running, all of them. But what we do have is a team of incredibly talented colleagues that are able to do things and have done things in their careers that are quite amazing. And most of them are in the position of a post-career, I would go so far as to say, a post-career curiosity. They've been there, they've done it twice, they've done it 3 times. Now they want to do something completely different. They want to use all that knowledge into making something new that they haven't done before. So people from the industry are migrating from the industry into research. And people in research and that have been in the universities, the so-called ivory tower, are really looking forward to embracing the technologies coming out of the industry. So what we have, if I do, this is where it gets sort of presentationally sloppy. So bear with me here. Okay. In this diagram, you have a professor, sort of there. And this looks very hierarchically. It's just a way of doing diagrams. Diagrams tend to sort of control the environment in which they try to represent. But you have a professor, you have PhD students, master students under them, and graduate students under that. So, and what professors do often is they do research and they look at things. And they have areas of inquiry. And that's irregardless of whether it's within medicine or mathematics or art or literature. They have an area of inquiry, something that motivates them to do what they do and something that keeps their interest tied to the task at hand. And the areas of inquiry here are developed in such a way or gathered in such a way so that they're cross-referential and they also help each other. So I should point out before I leave this little diagram here, also that, there we go. So that it's not just knowledge going from professors down. This is such a new field. So, and if you look outside this room and look at what all the students doing there, it isn't, I would say it's research. Okay, they're not qualified researchers, but they're developing things, they're developing knowledge, they're developing completely new languages and syntaxes. And so there's equally amount for professors to learn from students. Even first-year students walking in the door after 10 weeks, some of them actually do amazing things that can be lifted into new products. Portal 2, that came out of a student project. And that's an amazing thing with a completely different way of dealing with game design and game mechanics. So it's not as hierarchical as one might first think. Okay, so I'm going to take you through this again. Try not to get seasick here. So we have Mikael Widberg, professor at Uppsala University. He's one of our partners in this. And if you look, all these areas, they converge on an overlapping area of inquiry. And this means basically, well, what is it that we all kind of want to do? And where do these interests converge? And how can our backgrounds facilitate further development in our area, but also in our colleagues' areas? Mikael Widberg, he works with human-computer interaction, and he's very dedicated toward what's called post-representational human-computer interaction, which, as I've understood it, is very much, it's an intuitive interaction. It's not just computer-based, it's not just buttons. The interface is like the Kinect, for example, where you use your body to communicate, you use your body as an interface. So it's the new path for human-computer interaction. We have Per Åger Falk. He's a professor in computer science, and he's done an amazing amount of things. He's not very old. I think he's about 38 years old, and he sits on every board, basically, that has to do with computer science at Uppsala in that university, and has an amazing amount of ability to achieve things. We have Mike Sellers, who's coming in. Not all these are 100%, so Mike Sellers will be at 35%. And he's coming in, Mike's background is from Sims 2 and Sims Online, Ultima Online. He's a veteran game designer from the industry. He's also done a lot of scientific work, papers, postgraduate work in artificial intelligence. We have Miriam Elidhari. She's our former PhD student and now lecturer and associate professor. And she's done work in Believable Agents. So basically, how do you use AI to make agents alive? How can you interact with what's called NPCs, non-player characters, in an online world, and it's believable? And if I do something to anger a character, well, that character's friends will remember that, and they'll be mad at me. And that whole connection, that whole sort of cause and effect, and that chain of cause and effect in the fictive world builds the narrative. And it doesn't build the narrative in a pre-written way. It builds the narrative as it unfolds based on the player's interactions, which is a completely different deal. It means basically you are experiencing snippets of life as you would, and it's fictive, sure, but it's also real. We have Elsa Nygren. She's been working a lot with ideas around consciousness and AI, and how close can you come to that, and what is the difference, and what is consciousness constituted of? And of course, it's an incredibly difficult question, and she's working with cellular automata, and it's an adventure. And there's certainly a lot of what she's doing and in there that can be applied to game design in a variety of ways. Then, as I said before, we have Professor Nakashima and Nakashima Labs. And this, for me, down here, was the first time I ever saw Gotland written in Japanese. And I don't know if it's correct or not, but it's correct. Okay, good, yeah. I was trusting Google Translator for that and playing it back and forth. And it's an amazing thing. You know, if you play this and you put it in Google Translator, it says Gotland in Japanese, but with a Japanese accent. And then if you play, and if you put Gotland in Swedish, it says it with a Swedish, like not Gotländskt, but almost. And if you do it in America, it's like Gotland. So it's amazing, the tools out there. And no, we haven't connected with Google as of yet. I imagine we would disappear quickly after that. We would be a part of the beast. But it's an amazing things that they do. Myself, as I said, I'm working with the arts. I come from the arts into game design because, frankly, I felt that game design has more to offer in the future than perhaps the contemporary arts do right now. So this is really where the excitement is. I really find it extremely interesting. Professor Richard Bartle, he did the first MUD and MUD 2, and he's an amazing person. This was 1978, so it was the first online, multi-user online game, multi-user online dungeon. And 1978, that's a pretty good achievement. He's now a professor at Essex. He took his PhD in artificial intelligence. Then we have Mr. Ernest Adams at the back. And Ernest has been with us for a long time and kind of helped us out, pulled us up out of our local framework and gave us that international input. So Ernest has been helping us a lot, and you did Madden games and NFL, and you've done an amazing amount of stuff. You started the GDC, which is the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco. Started IGDA, right? Yeah. Okay. All right, co-finder, yeah. And the IGDA, so I mean, it's an amazing thing, and the grand old man of games, and not very old, just grand. So impressive. So I have the privilege of having this amazing group of people that basically are here to meet each other. And they're in this context to meet each other. And they're hoping, one and each of them, that when they meet each other, they can get that wealth of knowledge that the other one has and the other one is willing to share. So, and from that, we hope to have our PhD students also providing a wealth of knowledge for us, but also learning something. So now I'll jump back into my keynote, if I can find it here. There we go. And apologies for that. That's really... I tell my students never to do that. So focus areas. As you heard, there was AI. There's a lot of AI. Now, AI is an amazing thing because you have all the programming and you have the intelligence and you can direct a huge variety of possibilities in an interactive environment. And we have Mike Sellers there, Richard Bartle, Professor Nakashima, and within that, an area of that, we have Believable Agents. So the Believable Agents, like AI, they're AI-driven, but they're also done in such a way where they're written to be believable. It's an enhanced fiction. So you have the game mechanics of the AI, you have the hard programming, but you also have the awareness of the profiles of building characters so that they are believable, they have depth, they have relationships, they act accordingly. They act in ways that you will expect and ways that you won't expect, but in a pre-authored way. I don't remember if you all remember the days of the NPCs walking against the walls. I always found that fascinating. Those days are over, unless we want to get romantic and go back to it, because they were kind of fascinating. Also intelligent agents in IA in game design. And Professor Nakashima has been working with intelligent agents, which basically are 3D characters that you can communicate verbally with on screen. So you can ask them to do things and they'll do it. And this comes out of a Japanese need of an aging populace where the service sector is not as big as it once was. So it's a virtual robotic service. And we also have there Ivona Hirshenko, and she's our PhD student from here, a lecturer or an adjunct here, and she's at the University of Dundee getting her PhD through a collaboration with them. And in that, as a part of this, we have also the motion capture, and with Andreas Wallman, who's an adjunct with us and doing amazing stuff, although not qualified according to academic standards to do research, finding some amazing, doing some amazing work, and really achieving some amazingly interesting things and applicable things. And then we have the post-representational human-computer interaction and interaction design. And there, as I said, we have Michael Wiberg. And he, like many of us, are exploring the emerging interaction society. So where's all this headed? What can we do with it? And what is our part as an academic stakeholders? What can we do that the industry, they're doing really well, but it's not their job to do our job. Our job is to provide an academic reflective lens on everything that's going on, and also sort of direct it in areas that we find a part of our agenda in terms of working at universities. And a lot of that is, well, let's look at society. What is our role in influencing society? My part in this is expressive and communication and convergent media interfaces and their applications. That's basically very complicated because I'm not quite sure yet. I'm still investigating this. We also have Stanislaw Sabramsky, and he's like Ivona, analyzing the semiology of gestures in touch-based human-computer interaction. So he's using human movements against touch-based, like surface screens, and Ivana's doing it against cameras. Andreas is doing it in the mocap in an immersed 3D world. So a lot of this is again, just finding out, how do we as individuals work with this computational media, make culture out of it, make immersive culture out of it, make meaningful culture out of this, and then, by the way, apply that to a lot of other things out there in society that, frankly, aren't working that well. There's a lot of really silly systems. And I think game and game design could actually do better design and help. So I'll just go through the PhD students quickly here. Stanislaw, again, as I said, multi-touch. Laurent de Filippo, he's a guest researcher. We have 6 PhD students at present. And this is interesting. This is a guy from France that learned Swedish, and his Swedish is pretty good. And he's been here about a year, and it's academic Swedish. And he's studying Nordic mythology and computer games in Swedish. And he's reading Strindberg, and he's reading, all these, the heavies. I haven't read them. I've been here a lot longer than that. Li Zhang from China, game localizations, key differences between Asian and Western game design. There's one of the things that is a big thing coming out of that is then the Asian model is, because pirating is an amazingly effective distribution system. People usually get the films down at the local towback shop or wherever they can get them before they actually hit the cinemas. And this is true of games as well. So the business model there is, well, come on in, it's free, you get to play, but if you really want to level up, you might need that sword, and you might need that shield to protect you from that other guy who just bought that sword. And then, of course, it's an economic and, of course, a play-based leveling, which is a different model. Don Gayer, he's also from the United States. He was also an adjunct here at the university formerly, and now has gone into research as a PhD student. And he's doing global game design key components, regardless of nation. So if Lee is looking at, well, what are the differences between these two? I think Don is looking at, well, what is central? What is the common denominator? So it doesn't matter if you're launching, well, some things don't matter if you're launching in Asia or in the United States. We have Patrick Prax. He's coming from Germany. And he's working with computer game communities. And as many people do, they're studying these things and looking for leadership roles and how do leaders emerge and how do the economic systems and things like this work, so they can take this knowledge and see how it's relevant to the world outside of games. Moyan is from Bangladesh, and he's using human modualities in game design. And one of the methods that we're doing here, and I should say too that we have 2 more PhD students openings. So as today, the University of Gotland isn't financing any of the PhD students mentioned here, just our participation and some of the staff in the research school. So we're opening up with 2 PhD positions that this university finances. So we do practice-based research and development and what is called generative design methods. And people say, well, you know, what's that? And I try to say, well, it's like the medical industry or the car industry. It's where you're doing research and you're applying it, but you're also doing it in a way that you have kind of an in-depth process, because this is also culture. Okay, that's difficult for you to see, and no, I do not have it in Illustrator. But I'll go from left to right, and basically there's an exploration period. It goes into conceptualization, and then you generate. After you've made something, as they have out there, you're doing an evaluation of that, and you reflect on your evaluation and the findings. And also, when those students are out there, just talking about them as an example, they're also watching all of you when all of you play their games. And they're watching all of you to see if they did a good job. Did you get it? Were you able? Did you find that nugget? Did you do this? Did you do that? And this is done in an iterative process. So it's just repeated. And that's also what the education is built on, is doing lots of projects, taking best practice out of those lots of projects and repeating those. And that is the end of this presentation. So thank you, and I'll open for questions.